Hello and happy Monday. Welcome in to another episode of the JD Sports Show live on 12 Ounce Sports. So happy you're with me for another Monday, another rant day, the day after week 2 of the NFL season. Lots to talk about today here on the JD Sports Show, and a lot to do here within this hour that I have with you here on 12 Ounce Sports. And thank you, whether you're listening on Twitter, Facebook, 12 Ounce Sports Radio Network.com, wherever you may be listening, Zingo TV. Thank you for tuning in, and let's get going. Last week, I sat here and gave you about a half hour rant about my Detroit Lions. Uh, and not much is going to change here in week 2. In fact, it pretty much is going to remain the same after a even more abysmal week 2 after the Lions had a 14-3 lead in Lambeau without fans, granted. They did it again. Now, this time they didn't wait till the fourth quarter to blow it. They blew it in the second quarter, and it all went down from hill from there. They scored 14 points in the first half, 7 in the second half, and they got blown out by Green Bay 42-21. But that's really, look, I made it pretty clear last week, at least I thought, that I really didn't have a lot of hope for this team this year after what I saw last week, and this week doesn't change that at all. It actually probably heightens that sense of not having any faith. But the reason I bring that up is because I want to talk about the structure of this organization. And I talked about it a little bit last week, and I talked about how I felt like Matt Patricia was, should be and will be fired. I talked about Bob Quinn, the general manager, probably should be fired. I also talked about how last week I was talking about how I thought it wasn't just their issue, it's a franchise issue, it's a Detroit issue, it's an owner issue. And I don't really think that position has changed. It still is. But I want to talk specifically about Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn today. And today's week 2 rant brought to you by 12 Ounce Sports. No, not really, but it is going to be a week 2 rant. And it's a little bit different than last week because, I want to specifically talk about the head coach, Matt Patricia, and the general manager, Bob Quinn. Matt Patricia has not had a 500 or winning record in his first 2 years as Lions head coach, and he certainly is not going to if he finishes this year. For those of you who maybe forgot or don't follow the Lions nearly as much, they fired Jim Caldwell after a 9-7 season. After making the playoffs twice, he got fired after a 9-7 season. Matt Patricia has 9 wins in his first 2 and a little bit years in Detroit. We fired a coach for having 9 wins in one season. And, look, I am not going to sit back and pretend like I didn't think Jim Caldwell probably should have been removed, because I do think he should have been. I don't think Jim Caldwell, not that he was a terrible coach by any means. I thought he was good, but I don't think he was going to take the team any higher than 9-7, 10-6, and maybe a playoff berth. That seemed to be the ceiling that Jim Caldwell was going to do. And that, look, for right now, I would love that. But, with the roster we were implementing and what we had when Jim Caldwell was fired, we had obviously a franchise quarterback, one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the league, Matthew Stafford. And you had some stuff built around him. I just thought a different coach might be able to take this team to the next level. And I still believe that to this day, that I don't think Jim Caldwell was the right coach. I still agree he should have been replaced, but this obviously was a poor choice. Now, I will also sit here and say, and I said it last week, I was a fan of the Matt Patricia hire. I was, because it was a defensive guy, and which we needed because our offense was the better part of the two. And, if Bob Quinn really wanted to instill this Patriot-type motto, I was like, okay, let's why not go all in and get a Patriot coach and some Patriot players, and let's see. Well, I was very wrong. Not only was I wrong, I was very wrong, and I even defended Matt after last year a little bit. I was a little bit more of not nearly as a fan after last year. I probably was more 50-50 on Matt Patricia after last year. After the first year, I was definitely like, okay, give him time, let him instill the team. After year two, I was like, okay, well, I think we'll see what they do in year three. And even though year three has just been 2 weeks into the season, I can already tell you year three, I'm not even sure Matt Patricia is going to last to the bye week. The Lions face Arizona next week, and then New Orleans, and then have a bye week. And I have no idea how anybody can sit here and I can't sit here and really believe that they can beat Arizona or New Orleans. There's just no way. I have no belief that they can do that. So realistically, they have a chance going to the bye 0-4. And I believe that if they do go 0-4, which I think is very likely, Matt Patricia should not be the head coach after the bye week. And they'll probably just get a interim. Probably somebody on the staff, maybe Darrell Bevel, the offensive coordinator, who's been one of the only somewhat bright spots on the coaching staff. But Matt Patricia has failed, and he has failed miserably. In fact, I would say Matt Patricia, I would argue, has been the worst Lions head coach since Rod Marinelli. And even Rod Marinelli, this many games through as a head coach, had 10 wins. Matt Patricia has 9. And Rod Marinelli went 0-16 with the Detroit Lions squad. And he's still, at this many games in his coaching career with the Lions and his head coach tenure, had more wins than Patricia. I mean, you could argue that if Matt Patricia went 0-16 this year, which I'm not sure he would last that far anyway, but for example, if he did, he would 100% be the worst Lions coach. And what's crazy is I never thought we would go, I was listening to Jeremy Reisman on Pride of Detroit last night, and, he made me kind of think about something. He brought up the fact that it seems like we have gone actually further backwards and into a deeper hole than when Patricia was brought in. And that's 100% true. Patricia was brought in to move this team that was a really, and still is a really good roster, and put them in a playoff. I mean, this team, roster-wise, should be in the playoff hunt every year. Even after his first year, they should have been in the playoff hunt. And again, like I said last week, they blew 10 fourth-quarter leads in year one, 8 last year. They've already blown 1 this year, and they've already had the lead by double digits in both their first 2 games and have lost both of their first 2 games. Matt Patricia, again, as I said, I think I think definitively is the worst Lions head coach is Rod Marinelli. You could argue he maybe even is worse than Rod Marinelli. And as Jeremy Reisman is, again, I was watching the Pride of Detroit podcast last night on their channel. He just, the point he made of it seems like we've actually gone farther back. We're almost back to the point where before we even had Matthew Stafford, that's how far back it feels like we are. Because you almost forget you have and I'm going to get to the Stafford thing in a minute because I really do want to talk about that, but it feels like we have nothing, right? It doesn't feel like we have a franchise quarterback. It doesn't feel like we have a really good running back core and a really good wide receiving core. It doesn't feel like we have a top, 3 cornerback who was not very good in his first game. Talking about Jeffrey Okudah. I'll let that slide. It was his first game against a really good Packer team, but still was very bad. And you look at the roster, and you look around at players that have left and or didn't make the roster under Bob Quinn, whether it was trading or drafting or free agency, how few hits that man has had in his tenure. Kenny Golladay, probably his best drafted player in his tenure in Detroit. That is really bad. when you have one big hit in a 4 or 5 year span as general manager. One really big Pro Bowl All-Star hit in Kenny Galladay. I'm not going to judge this year's rookie class yet because that's unfair. And I know Jeff Okudah, the third overall pick, looked disastrous, but it was his first ever game. He was facing a top-level receiver in Devontae Adams, a top-level quarterback in Aaron Rodgers, a top-level scheme in Green Bay. But it wasn't very, heartwarming to see. It didn't make me feel good because, again, as I just said, Bob Quinn's drafting skills have been horrendous. Taylor Decker, who he drafted in his first draft class, by the way, in the first round, probably is number 2 on that list. And he's good, and he just got that big extension. I don't think Taylor Decker is bad, but is he elite? No. Is he good? Yeah, I would say he's probably good. Frank Ragnow I would say Frank Ragnow might be slightly ahead of Decker in terms of the better draftee. Both good, but again, really the only elite talent Bob Quinn has drafted has been Kenny Galladay. Frank Ragnow probably right below that, and Decker below that. But I mean, think about all the players he's drafted in 4 or 5 draft classes. To have one elite drafted, that's miserable. I mean, that's hard. That's almost like hard to only be able to hit once, to get a home run on one drafted. And that was a second round pick, so that makes it even worse because it means you're not drafting very well with your first round pick. And again, Ragnow and Decker were, and again, I don't want to slander, I want to be fair, those were first round picks. They weren't bad. But again, not elite home runs like Kenny Galladay is, who is a perennial top 10 receiver in the league. Ragnow, I think, I would argue, yeah, he's probably a top 10 center. Is Decker a top 10 tackle in the league? No. And every time, and we've had the same, and the I think maybe the most frustrating thing about it is we've had the same, and I mean the Lions have had the same problems every year. They can't block. They have no plugs on the defensive side of the ball, and they can't cover a sneeze. It's been the same issues every single year that Bob Quinn has been here, and nothing has changed. We still have no protection on the offensive line. Our defensive line gets gashed every game, every play, and the secondary is still horrendous. We still are giving up 200, 300-yard passing games to quarterbacks every week. Now, part of that is scheme. Absolutely. I would 100% agree. Part of that is scheme. And that falls, again, on the coaching staff that has not changed. But that also falls on personnel. And look, I don't think Bob Quinn has not tried. I have seen his free agent signings and his draftees and yada, yada. I think he has tried. I mean, look, Jeffrey Okudah was the best player available at number 3 in my opinion. I think Isaiah Simmons and Derek Brown, you could argue, but I think at number 3, with what was gone, Chase Young, who was the number 1 defensive player, Okudah was the right pick. And he knew that was a need. I mean, you could have gone with any of those 3 guys, Simmons, Brown, and Okudah. They all could have filled a hole. The trade that he made for Damon Harrison, I loved that trade because it's exactly what we needed. It didn't work out, and that's where I go to the scheme thing, because how in the world did Damon Harrison, who came over as one of the top defensive tackles in the league, suddenly disappear? And look, he even said himself, the scheme did not fit him. Well, make it fit him. That was so frustrating to me as a fan. Why would you not, if you're Matt Patricia, you have sitting there one of the best run-stopping defensive tackles in the NFL. Bob, your general manager, went out and traded for him. Make the scheme work for the guy. He traded him for a reason. Help him out with your scheme. It's so frustrating just to watch this team week after week, year after year, have the same issues, whether it be from roster standpoint or coaching standpoint. Discipline is horrendous. There was I mean, week one, you had Jamie Collins headbutting an official, and I don't care if he said it was, you know, not intentional or not. I still did it. And then this past week, you had Will Harris getting back-to-back personal foul calls. I mean, this team, and that's just this year. I mean, last year they were. I mean, they have been so undisciplined under Matt Patricia. It's a joke. And I honestly didn't think they could get. And I thought the Detroit Lions were the most undisciplined under Jim Schwartz. I mean, they were horrendously undisciplined. That was the Ndamukong Suh and Nick Farley era where, I mean, it was a free for all under Jim Schwartz. It felt like nobody had control of that team. But this is a pretty close second, it feels like. I think there's a little bit more control, but it is still an undisciplined squad. And it's been like that since he's come over. And then you trade away your top, not only your top corner, but a top 5 corner, top 10 corner league, Pro Bowler, and Darius Slay because he doesn't fit with Matt Patricia. I just don't know what to say, and I know as again I was watching the Pride of Detroit podcast and they were, pretty much in the same boat. There's really not a lot you can say or do at this point that hasn't already been said as a Lions fan. It's just what it is. I mean, we've been watching it for years. I've been, watching Lions my entire life, and it seems like it's the same issues every year, and you wonder how it will get fixed. And I don't know. I don't know if I have the answer, but I do know this. Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia are not the solution, 100%. There's no reason Matt Patricia should be the head coach this week, and there's no reason Bob Quinn should still be the general manager. Once again, you can see that his free agents have done nothing. His draft this year, but I think, again, not fair to judge yet, but so far has not looked great outside of maybe the offensive lineman he got, Jonah Jackson and Quintez Cephas. Again, I don't want to judge the draft class. That's unfair after 2 weeks. But the free agents that he's brought in have looked, I think Desmond Truly, I think Desmond Trufant was a fantastic free agent signing. It's just unfortunate he's gotten hurt. But I just don't. This is not the team. This is not the answer. Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia are not going to take the Detroit Lions anywhere more than, if at best, 8-8, 9-7, and not this year. I mean, I'm just saying that would be, I feel like, the peak, and they haven't done that yet. They haven't even done that yet. I think what's frustrating about it is it felt like after every draft, I was pretty happy with what I saw on paper, but it's like that's where I go back to, again, the coaching. It feels like the development of these players is not working. So maybe it isn't, maybe I'm being a little too harsh on Bob Quinn because the development of these young guys who, again, I thought when I looked at the draft classes were really good, but it seems like every year there's only 1 or 2 guys. And that's normal, right? I mean, look, even the best teams aren't going to have 7 drafted play, 7, that this is, realistically, I think on average, of the 7 players, let's just say you have 7 picks in 7 rounds. On average, maybe 2 will make the roster and be, really good, 2 or 3. So, that's fine. But, man, it just, again, only 1 elite top drafted player in Bob Quinn's era, and that'd be Kenny Galladay. Frank Ragnow probably right there or right under that caliber. Yeah, I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tweet me at the JD Show. Facebook. Text me if you know my number. I mean, I just curious about everybody else. Again, watching the Pride of Detroit podcast last night I was very similar in their feelings and just I think all Lions fans are feeling the same way. And if you're not a Lions fan, it's hard, unless you're a Browns or Bengals fan, it's kind of hard to understand what Lions fans feel. Again, unless you're a Bengals or a Browns fan, you're probably in a very similar position, although the Browns have a win this year. And the Bengals have a really good future. But right now, I don't know what to do. I want to get to the Matthew Stafford thing because I tweeted out last night. I couldn't believe, I was shocked how much Matthew Stafford slander there was from Detroit Lions fans. I think people forget that even through all these terrible years, he remained the constant of the team. Whether it be by off the field leadership, on the field leadership, and his play. I mean, this dude consistently, Matthew Stafford has been a top 10 quarterback in the league, even through the most horrendous years. He's played through injuries. He has led this team. He's been the leader. I just don't get it. This has been our rock, our stable in this terrible abundance of years. And it was frustrating to see so many Lions fans kind of slander him yesterday. And I know he didn't have a great game. I mean, he's had 200 plus yards and a couple touchdowns and a pick. But uh, man, that's frustrating to me because Matthew Stafford has been the only constant in Detroit football team for years. Since they drafted him in 2009, he has been the only really good thing around here, besides when Calvin Johnson was in Detroit. Other than that, Stafford's been the only good, consistent thing year after year. I mean, one thing you can always rely on is Matthew Stafford's going to do what he can to try to help win a game. And, he has done that. The dude's been through like 8 offensive coordinators, 5 head coaches. I mean, what do you expect? Aaron Rodgers has been through 2 coaches. So, Drew Brees has been with 1 head coach his whole career. I mean, it's just, since he's been with the Saints, I should say, not his whole career, but since he went to New Orleans. Matthew has never had consistency around him. And I'm not just saying by coaching. I mean, his offensive line has always been horrendous. He's always done well with his receivers, I think. He's never really had a running game until, I think, maybe the last couple of years, and that 1 year with Reggie Bush. Outside of that, he's never had a running game. I mean, he's had to pass. I mean, and yeah, I'll be honest. Yeah, he probably has a lot of passing yards because that's all they really could do for the majority of his career's past. But he still did it successfully and well. I just if you have beef with Matthew Stafford, I just don't get it. I don't think there's a legitimate gripe against the guy. Now, if you want to make the argument that maybe it's time to think about the future, I have no problem with that because I think that that's a fair point. I mean, I think Matthew would say it's a fair point. The guy is getting older. He's getting more beat up. I believe Matthew still has at least 4 or 5 elite years left in him, but I don't think there's anything wrong with maybe thinking about the future. I mean, Aaron Rodgers still has probably 4 or 5 elite years left in him, but they drafted a quarterback in the first round. I don't think there's anything wrong with thinking about the future, but to slander him and talk about how he's part of the problem or he hasn't been great or the worst nickname in sports is Stat Padford. I hate that. I cannot stand that nickname. I think that is a easy way out for people to justify a good player and for people who just don't want to see what they want to see. Because he's still playing the game when the game might be out of reach. I guess he's just supposed to stop playing the game when it's out of reach, according to some people who say Stat Padford on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. I still believe Matthew Stafford is a top 10 quarterback in the league right now. If you put him in New Orleans or Dallas, any of these teams with a high-profile offensive line, I mean, imagine Drew Brees in Detroit with this offensive line. Imagine Drew Brees is one of the most immobile quarterbacks in the league. He's a pocket passer. He would have, and it's nothing against Drew Brees. My point is how bad the Lions' offensive line is. He would not have nearly the success here because that's how bad the offensive line is. You put Matthew Stafford over in New Orleans for a couple of years, he's there in the playoffs and making Super Bowl runs. So I don't think a lot of people. I think a lot of really good quarterbacks would struggle in Detroit. I think Matthew Stafford has kind of had to adapt to it, and I think that's why he has still been, somewhat successful because he's just had to kind of deal with it. But if you put a Drew Brees over here, throw him into this offensive line fire and over to this coaching scheme, you'd have 2 different worlds. For example, last night I was talking to our fantasy football buddies, and we were talking about how, we were arguing about Saquon Barkley and Alvin Kamara. I said, well, yeah, Saquon Barkley, I mean, he's, had two 1,000 rushing years. He's had a 2,000 yard rushing or from scrimmage year. He's had 1,000 plus scrimmage year, and he's been hurt. And my buddy made the point of, well, he thinks Alvin Kamara is better, and I don't think Alvin Kamara is a bad running back at all. I think he's a great running back. But like again, I said, put Saquon Barkley in New Orleans with that offensive line and that system, and imagine what he would be having 2,000 yards from scrimmage every year easily because of the scheme that they have in the offensive line. You put Alvin Kamara over in New York, he's probably a middle of the road running back, and that's not necessarily because of the player. That's because of the scheme and the system around them. Same thing with Matthew Stafford. You put him in a great situation somewhere else, he's probably a top 5 quarterback in the league, but because he's in a terrible franchise with a terrible coach, terrible general manager, an organization that is lost and has never built around him as well as they should, he's still a great quarterback. But again, like I said a minute ago, I think it frustrates me because I think Matthew Stafford, the slander against him is frustrating. But I don't know. It is what it is. The official theme song of the JD Sports Show is Odyssey by Scorch, featuring Austin Tennant. Go check out Scorch on SoundCloud, and thank you to them for Odyssey. Thank you to our sponsor, the Fields Golf Course. Make sure to visit their website, thefieldsgolfcourse.com, now to book a tee time and for future availabilities. Just want to take a moment to tell you all about 12 Ounce Sports. Now that the action is officially back on, 12 Ounce Sports is your home for the best live talk shows, covering all aspects of the sporting world and live game broadcasts. With Zingo TV adding 12 Ounce Sports to their long list of channels, you can now catch my show and all others on Zingo TV channel 761. All you got to do is download Zingo TV and use the promo code 120Z. That's 12 ounce when signing up. It's that simple. Be sure to check out our latest blogs and podcasts as well on 12ouncesportsradio.com. Sports are in full swing, and I want to help you take advantage of those sports investments when getting in on the action. 12 Ounce Sports is officially partnered with MyBookie to get you the best deal possible. When you sign up on mybookie.ag, they'll match your first deposit up to $1,000 when you punch in the promo code 12 Ounce Sports. That's 12 Ounce Sports when signing up on mybookie.ag to get your first deposit matched up to $1,000. We'll take a quick break right here on the JD Sports Show. We'll be right back with you. Coming up, we're going to take a look around the rest of the league in the NFL and talk about Michigan football.
Drinkade, ready for distribution worldwide.
All right, and welcome back to the JD Sports Show here on 12 Ounce Sports. Glad you could be with us again for another week here on the JD Sports Show. Let's take a look around the rest of the NFL week and take a gander at what we have for the Monday night game today. Back on Thursday, the Browns beat the Bengals 35-30 in a really great Thursday night game. I mean, nobody, I don't think, well, okay, maybe not nobody, but I didn't think that game was going to be very good. It was a very good game. I said it Thursday night, and I said it yesterday in my tweet as well. I think Joe Burrow has a really good chance to be special. I mean, he is doing something. I think people forget there was no preseason. There was a very limited training camp. He's on a roster that is very meh. They had a first pick for a reason, and he is playing really, really well. I think Joe Burrow. I said it in my tweet yesterday. I think Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, who I'll get to in a minute, and Tua Tagovailoa, the three top quarterbacks in this year's draft, all have a chance to be really good. I think this is, 2017 with Mahomes and Watson, and then this year with those three guys, those are going to be some really big draft classes when you look at the future. 2017 also had Christian McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara, but just looking at quarterbacks specifically. But the Browns and Baker Mayfield played just a little bit better. Mayfield looked good. The Browns win 35-30. Tons and tons and tons of big name injuries, including in the Bears-Giants game. Saquon Barkley went down. It was confirmed today he has tore his ACL. He'll be out the rest of the year. Terrible, terrible news. Of course, not just for Giants fans, but for the NFL. Saquon Barkley, one of the most fun players to watch. Hope the best for him. The Bears held on. They were up big, and the Giants almost made a comeback without Saquon. The Bears won 17-13. In the most improbable game yesterday, somehow the Dallas Cowboys won 40-39. Dak Prescott went off. He's the first ever quarterback to throw for 400 yards and have 3 rushing touchdowns in a game. He did that against the Falcons yesterday. The Falcons had a 20-point lead at one time, and they were up by 15 with 4 minutes to go, and then completely threw the game away as only the Atlanta Falcons could, including an onside kick by the Cowboys that they just let dribble instead of just touching it and getting the penalty against Dallas. I have no idea what they were thinking. It was a terrible job by the special teams of Atlanta, and of course Dallas went down, and Greg Zuerlein kicked the game-winning kick. That was a great game to watch, and the Falcons fans have to be miserable because once again, Atlanta and blew a big game lead on center stage. As I mentioned earlier, the Packers destroyed my Lions 42-21. Aaron Rodgers, an early season MVP candidate, I think so. 240 yards and a couple touchdown passes. Aaron Jones went off yesterday as well. How about Ryan Tannehill? 4 touchdown passes in their win yesterday over Gardner Minshew and the Jaguars. The Titans go to 2-0. They won 33-30 over the Jaguars. Minshew had a pretty good game himself. The 2 picks hurt. I didn't get to watch a lot of that game, but it sounded like his 2 picks were a big factor in that game. Stephen Gostkowski, who had a miserable week last week against Denver, ended up winning the game-winning kick last week. He did again this week. Minshew, by the way, had 339, 3 touchdowns, and 2 picks. But how about Ryan Tannehill? 239, 4 touchdowns. Jonnu Smith, their tight end, caught 2 of those 4 touchdowns. And the Titans are 2-0. I think in one of the more crazy games yesterday, the Vikings got dismantled. The Colts won 28-11. Remember, the Colts looked pretty bad against the Jaguars, but the Vikings looked horrendous. And maybe not necessarily the Vikings, maybe I should say Kirk Cousins. 11 for 26, 113, 3 picks for Kirk Cousins. Now, it is notorious, right? Kirk Cousins has always been a second half guy. But the Vikings are 0-2. They have looked really bad so far, and Kirk Cousins was miserable yesterday, and the Colts won big, 28-11. The Buffalo Bills and another early MVP type candidate, Josh Allen, won over the Dolphins 31-28. They go to 2-0. Josh Allen had 417 yards, 4 passing touchdowns, and his new target, Stephon Diggs, had a really big game, 153 yards and a touchdown catch as well. And the Bills, that game wasn't, I don't think was, the Dolphins scored late to make it a little bit closer than it was. But still big, the Dolphins had a chance, onside kick, but they didn't get it. And the Bills win and go to 2-0. Speaking of big injuries, in the 49ers game, they lost 2 key players. They beat the Jets 31-13. They're now 1-1, but they lost Nick Bosa to the year for a torn ACL. And still waiting on to hear from Jimmy Garoppolo and Raheem Mostert. their starting quarterback and starting running back on the extent of their injuries. But if all though they already know Bosa's out for the year. If they lose Garoppolo and Mostert for extended period of time, the San Francisco 49ers are going to have to climb a really hard uphill battle for the rest of this for the extended period of time. However long those two players are out, that is three. I mean that is three of the 49ers' best players right there. I mean you're talking about their best defensive player in Bosa. Probably their two best weapons on the offensive side, their quarterback Garoppolo and Raheem Mostert. That is huge loss for the 49ers. They did win, but boy, I don't know if it was worth it. How about the LA Rams? I think they've been a bit of a surprise to some people this year. They beat the Eagles 37-19. I think both these teams have been surprises for different reasons. The Rams are 2-0. They beat the Cowboys and the Eagles, and the Rams have looked really good. I think look. I don't know if they look quite as good as the year they went to the Super Bowl, but it feels like they're a better team than people expected. And I think Sean McVay has that team in a position in a really tough West to be in position to make the playoffs and be a really interesting team. I think they're a team to watch. However, on the flip side of that, the Eagles have been a miserable 0-2. They have been a surprising 0-2. They blew the lead against the Washington football team last week, and they were never in the lead this week, and they really weren't not in it for most of it. At one point, they were within a score, but LA kind of changed that quickly. They went down and scored again. Carson Wentz, 242 with 2 picks, no touchdowns again, rough. Goff had another great game, 267, 3 touchdowns, no picks. 20 for 27, accurate. That's what Goff has been under McVay. He's been an accurate passer. Again, kind of the opposite. LA's been surprising, while the Eagles have been surprisingly bad. For the Eagles specifically, I like I said, I like Carson Wentz. I'm rooting for Carson Wentz. This is really going to be, these next couple of weeks, I think, are so important for Carson Wentz and the future of the Eagles. If Carson Wentz these next few weeks does not show that he can dig this team out of a hole and be a franchise quarterback, like we saw the year he was going to win an MVP war a couple of years ago, then the Eagles are in trouble and they may have to start thinking about their future. Pittsburgh goes to 2-0. They beat the Broncos. Injury again. Drew Lock went out early with a bad shoulder injury. How about Jeff Driscoll, the former Lion backup quarterback, came in and almost led the Broncos back. They had a chance late, but were unable to capitalize. The Steelers held on 26-21. Driscoll had 256 yards passing, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Big Ben's comeback player of the year possibility of 311 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick. The Broncos are, I said in my prediction show, I thought they were going to go 10-6 and be a really surprise team. If Drew Lock is out for an extended period of time, which we don't know, I was hearing reports last night that they feared it could be a bad shoulder injury. That will change everything in Denver, although, again, they'll have, time to practice with Jeff Driscoll. Tom Brady wins Game 1 in his Buccaneer era. And the Buccaneers beat the Panthers 31-17. Again, a score. The Buccaneers were up 21-0, and the Panthers kind of made a late charge comeback, but then the Buccaneers started to get away a little bit. Teddy Bridgewater has been so far. He had 367 passing yards, but he had 2 really monster picks that hurt them. Another key injury, Christian McCaffrey went out with an ankle injury, and it was stated today that he is expected to miss several weeks. So huge injury for a Carolina team that is already 0-2 and now have lost their best offensive, and not only offensive, their best player on their squad. And again, has been reported he's going to miss several weeks with an injury. Kyler Murray, I think, might be right now my front runner for MVP. He and the Cardinals beat the Washington football team 30-15. Murray had a passing touchdown, a couple of rushing touchdowns. He had a pick, 286 passing. DeAndre Hopkins also had another touchdown this week. The Cardinals are a really good team to watch. I think they're going to probably destroy my Detroit Lions next week, but that's okay. At least I'll get to watch a fun team in Arizona. I think Cliff Kingsbury, a lot of people questioned that hire. I think he was a perfect hire because of the system he wants to run, because it fits perfectly with Kyler Murray. Hey, Detroit, take notes. That's how you build a system around a coach and a quarterback You make sure they can work together. That's what Arizona has done with Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury. It's worked so far, and again, I think they're going to be. That West is so tough. I mean, Arizona, Seattle, LA, and San Francisco. Even with San Francisco injury, that is I think the toughest division in football, and it's not getting any easier because the Cardinals, the Rams, and the Seahawks are all 2-0. The Ravens beat the Texans big. Lamar Jackson, you could argue he's right there in the MVP running as well. Kind of a quiet day for Lamar Jackson standards, but they won 33-16. They won pretty sound over the Texans. I said it last week, and I'll say it again. I want Deshaun Watson. I want Bill O'Brien out of Houston as badly as I want Matt Patricia out of Detroit, because if they get the right coach and system around Deshaun Watson, he is an elite level quarterback. They just have to give him help. That starts with a better coach and some players around him. He has nothing around him, really. It's bad. I feel bad for him. Brandon Cooks and Randall Cobb are good. They're not elite level receivers, and they traded their best one in DeAndre Hopkins. Bill O'Brien's got to go, though. And last night, in what was a thrilling Sunday night football game, the Seattle Seahawks hung on by the chin of their chinny chin chin, 35-30 over the Patriots. They go to 2-0. Russell Wilson, actually, I said Kyler Murray. I'm going to actually say Russell Wilson is my MVP right now. 5 touchdowns, 1 pick, 288. Cam Newton and the Patriots look really good. If you didn't watch or don't know them, the Patriots had the ball at the 2 with 3 seconds left. They tried to run a QB draw with Cam Newton. It did not work. The Seahawks stuffed Newton at the line, and the Seattle Seahawks hung on to beat the New England Patriots 35-30. Monday Night Football game tonight, 8:15 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. The Saints are heading to Las Vegas. The Raiders are going to open up in their new stadium. The Las Vegas Raiders take on the Saints, both 1-0. The Saints will be 2-0. I'm going to take New Orleans 31-21 over the Raiders tonight. I think the Raiders are a good team, but I think the Saints are a really good team, like top 5 or so team in the NFL. And I think they'll spoil the Raiders home opener 31-21. Again, that's on ESPN tonight. All right. Whew. There's your week 2. Scores and news. Lots of injuries. Lots and lots of injuries in week 2 of the NFL. Lots of big names. Barkley, Bosa, Garoppolo, McCaffrey, Devontae Adams, I forgot to mention. He went out with a hamstring injury in the Green Bay game. Those can linger. Lots of big name injuries around the league, and a lot of you wonder if it because of the limited preseason training camps and no preseason and the limited training camps, if that came up. By the way, I was reading this morning that the NFL is going to look into the turf at MetLife Stadium. Remember, 3 49ers got hurt: Garoppolo, Mostert, and Bosa, who tore his ACL. And Bosa said he felt like the turf was a problem. He said it was like a sticky turf and felt like it was an issue. So the NFL is going to do an investigation into MetLife Stadium, which is the home of the Jets and the Giants, to test out the turf because it was an issue. It took out 3 of the best players on the 49ers, including 1 for the year. And so they're going to investigate that. So something to watch for. It'll be interesting because, again, Bosa did say that he felt like it was kind of a sticky turf last night. By the way, you know what I just realized? I don't think I ever talked about the Chiefs and Chargers game. The Chiefs, I don't know how I completely skipped that game, but the Chiefs beat the Chargers 23-20 in overtime. I was just looking at the scores and just realized, I apologize for that. But the Chiefs came back. They were down a couple of scores, but as always, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs find a way to come back. They beat Justin Herbert in his NFL debut in overtime 23-20. By the way, Justin Herbert, I thought, looked really good in his debut. I mean, he wasn't even supposed to play. Tyrod Taylor hurt himself and re-aggravated his ribs in warm-up, so Herbert was thrust into the starting position against the defending Super Bowl champions. And I thought Herbert looked really good. Now, the thing for him, the difference between him and Burrow, is they have stuff around Herbert. They have a really good defense, and they have really good offensive weapons, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler. If they just continue to build a better offensive line around him and maybe another weapon, he and that Chargers team is going to be good in a couple years. I think they found their franchise quarterback. I know it was one game, but he was really good in a thrusted spot. I think him, Burrow, and Tagovailoa are all really going to be good quarterbacks. Speaking of quarterbacks, let's finish off with some Michigan Wolverine and Big Ten schedule talk. Shall we? First of all, the Big Ten schedule came out this past Saturday, and Michigan was given, the usual tough schedule. I didn't expect anything different. Ohio State and Wisconsin were given the two easiest schedules in the Big Ten. No shocker, considering they are the two favorites to win the Big Ten. And, I don't know. I do believe that the Big Ten probably would like to see somebody get to the playoffs. Although I will say Ohio State week 2 at Penn State on Halloween, October 31st. Is going to be a really good game. I think that could decide who wins the East, that Penn State-Ohio State game. That should be good. But I want to focus on Michigan for a second because that is my squad. I want to look at their schedule. I want to talk about this team. So we know a couple things. One, we now know Joe Milton's going to be the number one quarterback for this team. Dylan McCaffrey, it sounds like, is going to transfer. Cade McNamara is going to be the backup. So that changes some things. So let me just run through the schedule real quick. So as of right now, there is no fans allowed at any Big Ten stadium. So nobody's going to be different than the other one. No Big Ten stadium is allowed to have fans as of now. So that's good for the start because Michigan will start on the road at Minnesota. They'll play Michigan State and the Spartans at home on Halloween to Indiana. Then they'll come home against Wisconsin, then head out to Pennsylvania to face the Rutgers. Then they'll be home against Penn State and Maryland and finish the season at Ohio State on December 12th. And then December 19th, they're calling it Champions Week. What will happen is the one seed and you'll match up from the East and West. So the one from the East and the one from the West will play. The two from the East, the two from the West will play, et cetera, et cetera. That was what will happen in Champions Week. So they get 8 regular season games and then the Champions Week. And everybody will play. So there'll be 9 games they'll play total. And then, of course, whatever happens with bowls and playoffs, et cetera. So let me run through the schedule here, and I'm going to give you what I think is going to happen between each game and my opinion. Okay, so here we go. So at Minnesota, I think they will take a loss. It's your first game. You're implementing a new quarterback. A lot of players lost. Jalen Mayfield coming back is huge. Sounds like Ambry Thomas might come back as well. If Nico Collins comes back, I start to feel a little bit better about this game. If Rashad Bateman, the top receiver at Minnesota, stays out, again, I also feel more towards Michigan in this one. But I think this is going to be a tough assignment week 1. If it was flipped, if Minnesota was week 2, I think they probably could do it. But I think they'll lose against Minnesota. Michigan State and Indiana the next 2 weeks, they'll win. Sparty's implementing an entire new system with Mel Tucker. Indiana will be tough. I think that will be a tough game, but I think they'll beat Indiana. They'll come home against Wisconsin. I think they will win that game. I know that might be a surprise to some people. I think they will beat Wisconsin this year. They always seem to play better when they're in the big house. I know there's no fans or anything. That will make a difference, but I do think that they're going to beat Wisconsin. I think they're going to want a little revenge on the Badgers after last year's game in Wisconsin. I think they'll win. They'll also beat Rutgers. I think their second loss will come the following week at home against Penn State, who I think is going to be right there with Ohio State in the East. That Halloween game is going to determine it. Whoever wins that second week, just Halloween game between Penn State and Ohio State, is going to win the Big Ten East. So, if Penn State happens to win that game, they're going to be really motivated to win out to win the East. And I think regardless, I think Michigan loses that game. I think they'll beat Maryland in their final home game of the year. And then, look, as much as I would love to sit here and say they're going to beat Ohio State, they're just not. They're not there yet. They're not there. I don't know if they'll ever be there, but they're definitely not there now, especially with a new quarterback and no real time to prepare this offseason. The good news is they're not going to have to face, now, as of now, that could change. That's December 12th. Fans could be put in place by then, but they possibly may not have to face Ohio State in Columbus without any fans. By the way, that's probably going to be the coldest Ohio State-Michigan game, considering it's going to be December 12th. That is the latest they've ever played. My dad made the joke that he's probably, I don't think he's like, I don't think I've ever had the Christmas tree up watching Michigan and Ohio State. That will change. And of course, Champions Week, hard to determine who they would play. Most likely, maybe Iowa um, as the three, because I think they'll finish as the 3 seed. I think Ohio State will win the East, Penn State, and then Michigan. So I have Michigan going 5-3, and if they do face Iowa in Champions Week, I feel good about that. So a 6-3 record overall. And honestly, I was, people were asking me, what do I think's real expectations, and what would I be okay with if they finished if they did exactly what I just said, 5-3, beat Michigan State because they have to beat. They cannot lose Michigan. Beat Michigan State, beat Wisconsin or Penn State, beat one of those the two big guns right there. I'd be happy with that. I mean, I can't. It's hard to expect a lot for a team that's in flux, a team that's with a new quarterback, a team that has lost some key players to the draft last year, and possibly the opt out players as well. I think they'll be good. I mean, 5-3, I would be happy with it. If they went 5-3, they beat Wisconsin, they beat Michigan State. As long as they were competitive against those three losses, especially, they cannot give up 60 points to Ohio State. Simple as that. If they, you cannot give up 60 points 3 years in a row, or Don Brown will have to find a new position. But as long as they're competitive in their three losses to a certain degree, and they beat Wisconsin or Penn State, and they beat Michigan State, and they went 5-3. And then, let's say go 6-3 by beating Iowa in the West, I'd be fine with that. I really would. I don't think I'd be mad about that at all. By the way, it wouldn't be probably Iowa. I think Iowa would probably finish first or second in the West. But yeah, I don't think I'd be terribly disappointed by that. Could be Minnesota again in a rematch. Could be Iowa actually. Probably Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa will be the three teams in the West to watch out for. So depend on, could be a rematch with Minnesota, could be a matchup with Iowa, could be a rematch with Wisconsin. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I just don't. I don't. This is probably. I'm maybe this is just me protecting myself, but I'm just not going into the season overly anticipated with the fact that I feel like this team is a 5-3 team. I don't think I'm going to trick myself into thinking that this team can go 8-0, 7-1, and beat Ohio State. That's hard to think. Would I love to see that? Yeah, absolutely, and I will cheer that, and I will hope that can happen. But it's just going to be hard to do with everything that's going on. And every team, I'm not trying to make excuses for Michigan because a lot of teams are on the same page. But Ohio State's returning a Heisman candidate quarterback. A couple of players that opted out have opted back in. They already have one of the best rosters in all of college football. Penn State, losing Micah Parsons is a huge loss to Penn State. But Sean Clifford and that offense will be still really good. I think their defense will be fine. Again, I think they'll finish second, but I think they'll give a good game to Ohio State week 2. Glad they put that game. I wish they would have put that game a little bit later in the season because I think it could have more importance. I still think that whoever wins that game will win the East. But I don't know. Again, as always, feel free to tweet me or Facebook message me or text me or whatever. Your thoughts on everything I've talked about today. The Lions, the NFL, Michigan, the Big Ten, everything that I've talked about. Make sure to go follow me on Twitter and like me on Facebook. Make sure to also follow and like 12 Ounce Sports in the Fields Golf Course. Thank you to everybody for listening today on this fine Monday. As always, I appreciate the support. I always appreciate when somebody tells me they listened in or give me a response about something I talked about. It always makes me feel good that somebody's listening. So thank you again for everybody listening today. I appreciate all the support. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next Monday.
Let somebody tell you can't do something. You got a dream, you got to protect it. People can't do something themselves. They want to tell you you can't do it. You want something, go get it. Period.